Believe it or not, it's been 1 year today since Fire Emblem Three Houses released worldwide on the Switch. Little did we know that the release of Three Houses, Byleth and Smash, and the Cinder Shadows DLC would bring about the destruction of the world, but in the end I think it was worth it. In some ways, it feels like only yesterday I was making deep dive videos about the latest Three Houses trailer, piecing together clues and details in any way I could to find the secrets hidden within. The hype cycle lasted me all the way to release, fueled by excitement and worry. Please, don't be another Fates. Once I got the game and played through it, I felt confident Three Houses lived up to the hype, even if I didn't think it was the best game in the series. But now that a year has passed and we have the entire Three Houses packages and simmered in our minds for months, have my thoughts on the title changed since release? The short answer? Yes, they have. Long answer? Well, that's the point of this video. So when I first finished Three Houses, I said on stream that I thought this was my favorite Fire Emblem game. I think the hype was talking to me a little bit. After I thought about it a little more, I came to the conclusion that while I liked a lot of the game, there were still some issues I had with it, namely graphics and what they did with the cutscenes, mostly those technical kind of issues I felt like. But from a gameplay standpoint, it was incredibly enjoyable, one of the best in the series. I loved making my units the way I want. It made me connect to the unit more than ever before. Now I know some people have said that they would like to be a little stricter in how they can customize, or even allowing some characters not to be customized at all. But for some reason, being able to be there for your students, teach them, help them grow and, overcome their weaknesses, not only was it good gameplay-wise, but it helped the narrative, push the narrative a lot better, I felt like. Other games had done something similar to that. Shadows of Valentia had their whole villager class thing, and they could go into whatever class that you wanted them to. But with Three Houses, it felt like there was more meaning to deciding what class they would take. You look at their strengths, you look at their weaknesses, and you decide okay, you have a little more magic here, or you aren't so great with the horses or for some reason, or, riding. So we'll have you focus on this or focus on that. It felt like I was an actual teacher or leader working with my army to use their strength to our advantage, which is what a good leader and teacher does. They use the strengths of their students or units or whatever to better their army. They don't have one way of victory. They change their way of victory to match the strengths and weaknesses of their army. And that's what it felt like I was doing with Three Houses. I mean, not to the T. I mean, there was always some times where, magic would be incredibly useful in some situations, and, flyers were OP at times. But overall, you look at who you have and the situation that is presented before you, and you kind of build around that. I think in that case, Three Houses gameplay was really phenomenal. And I think the map design for the most part was pretty good too. I was a little disappointed in the lack of variety, especially with a lot of the side battles, the grinding missions. There wasn't enough variety in the sense of different landscapes. I mean, I understand there's just side quest stuff, but it does get a little repetitive after a while. When there are more maps to play on that you've seen within the main campaign, you kind of wish that was brought up more. But even within the main campaign, there was moments where the map that was being used was the same map that was used 2 chapters ago for an area in Foland that was miles away from this. So in that sense, I didn't like the fact that they reused maps a lot, more so than they should have, I think. However, the actual designs of the battles, where the units are placed and when the reinforcements come and everything, that I thought was fantastic. I think they delivered on excellent battles and excellent enemy placement. So that goes into story. Three Houses' story is lore-rich, but it also makes it confusing at times. I mean, I won't go into spoilers right now. I'm going to save that for later on in the video so people can skip that if they want. The story is very interesting, and it really grabs your attention. Why certain points of history are the way they are, why certain characters are at war with others. It does lead to a lot of thinking and a lot of question asking. But not all those questions are answered, especially if you don't do the support conversations or even just talk to people in the monastery. If you're not taking the time to talk to your units or pay attention to the supports, you're going to miss out on some important plot details. And I kind of went over that in my review, so if you haven't seen that yet, please check it out. But I went over that in my review, and I still feel the same way. I liked what they were doing, making sure that the lore was there, which, like I said in my review, Fate struggled with that. There was basically no lore. The world just felt so blank in comparison to other Fire Emblem games. And so they definitely went in with all these lore implications, all of these narrative ideas. But I wonder if they didn't think about how they would all connect, or they didn't want to bother connecting them all. There's definitely still questions I have about the plot, particularly about, well, I don't want to say who. Just certain characters. Certain characters I want to know more about, and we didn't get enough about, in my opinion. But you do still need to play all 4 routes in order to at least understand as much as you can. I think once you play the 4 routes, which is a lot of time, I understand. Once you play the 4 routes, you will feel confident enough in the narrative that's being told. But even then, I wish there was more conclusion with some of these characters. It's hard to have a perfect story with everything answered. I understand that, especially in such a, a complicated situation as Fodlan is. And 3 Houses makes it, with choosing 3 different paths. I think it's kind of hard to keep a solid narrative through all 3 paths without some plot holes appearing. I guess that goes also into the characters themselves. I think this cast is one of the strongest casts of Fire Emblem has ever had, without a doubt. I thought Shadows of Valentia was fantastic, and I still do, but I may like 3 Houses cast more overall when it's all said and done. And part of that has to do with helping them grow and listening to them constant, because a lot of these students will have something to say about the current events. You don't really have too many units who are just bench warmers who never do anything. I mean, you can choose to have bench warmers, that's fine, but everyone will usually have something to say about the ongoings and the current events, which I appreciate, and I think that makes the world more believable, the characters more relatable. And so that's why I think this cast is so fantastic. Another reason why is they're not over the top with their one quirk or their one, characteristic. We had that a lot in Awakening and Fates, especially Fates, where, this is the dumb one, this is the monk, they were very one-dimensional in a lot of cases. Not everyone, but a lot of them were one-dimensional. Not so much in 3 Houses. 3 Houses, everyone, while they have strong characteristics that make them stand out for the others, there's still depth within there. Let's take Dorothea, for example. Dorothea, you look at her and the way she kind of acts, you would think, oh, she's kind of a gold digger. She's trying to look for a spouse that will help her live happily, nobility, that sort of thing. And so that's the one thing she has in mind. And she's kind of this popular pop singer. Well, I guess not a pop singer. That's not really a thing in the Fodlan, but the equivalent of a pop idol. But you get to know her better. You see her struggles, because she was a lower class, and her poverty, how she struggled through that, her heroes she looks up to, why she wants to marry. There's more to her than just boy crazy, or not even boy crazy, just marriage obsessed, wants to have a good life woman. Dorothea, which is the first one that popped in my mind. I'll be honest, Dorothea is not my favorite character, but she's not bad. But I think even then, I can still find her charming and believable. If I had to say my favorite characters, I said this in my review, but I think my favorite characters are Ingrid, Ferdinand, Caspar, this is not in any order, Edelgard, Dimitri, Mercedes, Hilda, gosh, I've really fallen in love with Hilda, Marianne, Sylvaina's grown on me, Lysithea, it's kind of hard to say no to her. There's so many good ones. I know maybe I listed too many there, but forgive me. But yeah, there's so many good ones, and even the teachers, Shamir, oh my gosh, I love Shamir. Step on me. What? Nothing! Moving on to the monastery. I hope in the future they bring back a monastery type setting. Not so much an actual church and, place for training or, training nights or whatever. Not looking for that. What I am looking for is a hub world where you can freely roam and interact with your units and the shops and the villagers and just look around and just really live in the world. I know not every game has to be like that, but I really did like it in 3 Houses. That may be a little controversial because some people just want to get straight onto the gameplay and not kind of deal with that stuff, but I like it. I do think they can improve upon it, make it maybe less tedious at times, but at the same time, it still felt like I wanted to do it. I wanted to talk to my students. I I wanted to see what was going on in their lives, and not so much that it felt like a chore. And the last thing I want to talk about is kind of unrelated to the game itself, but more about its marketing. I think that they did a pretty good job getting Three Houses in people's face. In Japan, they had been marketing it from, I think, E3. After E3, they had columns in Famitsu. I mean, Famitsu, they're consistent with that kind of stuff. But, they had started doing Twitter and social media much earlier because Fire Emblem is bigger in Japan. At least I'm pretty sure it is. The audience is slightly bigger there. Kind of took Nintendo a little bit to start getting on the Three Houses train, but they did eventually get there, and I think they were pushing it on social media more, and people were seeing Edelgard, Dimitri, and Claude, and falling in love with Claude, really. And I think that has to do with the voice actor's name, Joe Zia. I can't pronounce your last name, Joe. I'm sorry. I'm terrible. Please forgive me. Joe's post about the game and, introducing people to Claude and trying to get hype for that, and just his personality, I think, brought a lot of attention to the Golden Deer and people supporting that. So I thought the marketing was good. I am disappointed about the sales, though. I don't think it's quite reached 3 million. I think it's kind of stuck at maybe 2.7 or 2.5. It's not where I want it to be. I want it to be the most selling game. I wanted it to be. It's on the Switch. To still be behind Fates, which, to be fair, had 3 versions, but even then, to be behind Fates when every Switch game has sold so well, to me is almost disappointing. I know that's a lot of money, 2.something million, 2.7 million, or whatever it is a good amount of money. Good amount of, or is that the units? I think that's the units, 2.7 units sold. However much money that is, that's good. That's a success. But for me, I wanted there to be more people introduced to the franchise than before. And there was definitely people who had never played Fire Emblem before who decided to pick up Three Houses just for the heck of it because they heard about the hype. And that's great. And there's probably some people who played previous Fire Emblem games who's like, you know what, I'm going to pass on this. It's not my cup of tea anymore. And that's fine. I just thought that this would be the game that skyrocketed the fan base even more. I mean, Awakening was the one that kind of saved it, or at least introduced a lot of people to it. I thought Three Houses would be that one again. Or at least I was hoping it would be. At first, I needed to make sure it was a good game. And once I realized it was a good game, it was like, okay, now let's see those sales. Bring it on. Maybe I'm being ungrateful and greedy, but I see games like, Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy VII, those JRPGs sell so well versus this one. And I know they're different kinds of RPGs, tactical versus, or strategical versus fairly typical RPG. But still, I think that so many more people would enjoy this series for the gameplay alone and the stories and characters if they would just give it a chance. But there's just some sort of barrier of entry, and I don't know what that is. Maybe I'll do a video on that sometime, talking about why there's a barrier and why people should at least give it a shot. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just a video game, so what does it matter? But anyway, hopefully eventually it hits past Fates, it hits the 3 million mark, but I don't think it's quite hit it yet. Something that was supposed to help with those sales was Byleth and Smash. And I'm not sure if it did or not. I don't know if Nintendo commented on the sales for Three Houses. I'm sure there's people out there who saw Byleth and Smash were like, you know what? I'm going to give the game a shot now. Why not? And kudos to you. I hope you enjoyed it. But the overwhelming negative response to Byleth and Smash was a little heartbreaking, but very understanding. I'll be honest, when I first heard, I was hyped, but I was also disappointed because as a Smash fan, immediate reaction was, we already have 7 Fire Emblem characters in Smash. Why in the world would we need another Fire Emblem avatar character who's probably just going to play the same as others? Now, to Sakurai's credit, Byleth turned out to be fairly unique, in my opinion, and plays pretty different from other Fire Emblem characters. So I appreciate that, very much so. But to the non-fan, having another Fire Emblem character just seems kind of like a blow to the gut. And might have the opposite effect of saying, you know what, I'm not ever going to buy a Fire Emblem game because there's too many reps in Smash. That sounds kind of petty, but I kind of don't blame them. if you get tired of a product, you don't want to give it any attention. I totally get that. Going to Byleth as a character, I love how they're not OP. They kind of just mid-tier, but they're still fun to play. They have, really powerful moves that if you hit them just right, you really punish your opponents. I love, I forget the axe's name, but the down B is so much fun. So satisfying to pull off. When you break their shield with it too, and they're just like, oh boy, this is gonna be good. And I like the fact that, and this is such a minor thing, but that they had the skin colors for the different houses. That one was really nice. To see Edelgard, Dimitri, and Claude, as skins. I kind of wanted to see Edelgard in Smash because we can get an axe user there. That was my hope. Or even Dimitri because he has the spear instead of a sword. But this was kind of a good middle ground. So I appreciate that. And I usually do play as Edelgard. So after the Smash DLC, like an hour or so later, they released the trailer for Cinder Shadows and that it was going to come out the next month. First off, let's talk about the DLC as a whole. As a whole, it was fine. I mean, I think it was worth the price. But before you got Cinder Shadows, everything before that was almost disappointing and pointless. It definitely felt like just things that could have been free updates rather than put a price upon it. And that got me kind of worried that we would have a Echoes or even Awakening and Fates DLC moment. I remember the price for Shadows of Valencia's DLC was just atrocious, more than the base game. Or no, I think it was as much as the base game. That rubbed me the wrong way. And I know there was bits and pieces of that were very good, but for the most part, it was way overpriced. Now this one was, I believe, the Cinder Shadows ended up being, $25 as a package. I was okay with what we were getting because I knew there was going to be something bigger coming, but at the same time, I was a little unsettled with what we were getting. I mean, don't get me wrong, the maid outfits were awesome, but I see some other games doing that as free updates or something like that. It's kind of I'm a little worried that you're kind of stealing my money, but to be fair, it takes time and effort to make those kind of models, so I understand at least some price, but it did feel a little pricey when we were first starting. But I knew the story was coming, or some sort of mode was coming that would make things worth it. Long story short, some of the DLC was fluff, but the Cinder Shadow DLC is worth the $25 alone, in my opinion. That's how much I loved it. Cinder Shadow is basically what old school Fire Emblem used to be, with set unit classes and set amount of units that you have to use in order to beat the map. So you have to make sure you understand your units and not just put your favorite ones in. You know what I mean? You have to kind of work with what you got. To be fair, the story is fairly straightforward, but it's entertaining. And that's what you could really ask for in a DLC like this. I was hoping there would be more answers rather than questions. I won't go into details or spoilers yet, but I will say that I was excited with what they brought up and what they revealed, but also it did raise a few more questions about the overall plot in my mind. But again, I still enjoyed it. But I think what made me enjoy it the most was the characters. I loved all four of them. They were 4 strong student characters. All 4 of them are units that I would love to have in my house at all times. Their interactions were strong. Their interactions with the units that came with you from the main campaign are strong. Overall, it's just a very good DLC. And that includes the maps too. This is a lot more difficult than the main campaign. I'd say it's about it's about the difficulty the Fire Emblem used to be as its standard, and I appreciated it. I mean, granted, I streamed a lot of it. There were moments that I just wanted to shut everything down and just walk away, but I persevered, and we were able to get through it. I liked that. I liked the challenge, which is surprising because usually I don't like too difficult of a challenge, but it felt like the difficulty in this one felt like I could do it, but I needed some luck. This is just unfair. I think I remember saying that at times. I was just livid with how difficult it could be. But then you get through and you're like, wow, I'm amazing. Did you see what I just did? So that was great. Another part of it is the pacing and the gameplay was just so fantastic. I appreciate what Three Houses brought to the table, like the main campaign with the customization, but it was refreshing to go back to a set experience with, set units, set classes, and to a degree set weapons, and not have to worry about making sure that they are going up in this stat or that stat. But you still have the free roaming of the Abyss, and that was still exciting, and I think it shows that can be used in future Fire Emblem games, which I'll talk about later on. I think overall the package of Cinder Shadows is just as strong as the main campaign. Maybe there are not as many impactful story moments, but gameplay moments, yes, for sure. And that's what makes it so much worth it. And I do like the ending boss a lot. It's a unique ending boss, at least the fight, so I appreciate that. And now it's time for the spoilers! If you don't want to be spoiled, please skip to this time now. Okay, let's talk about favorite story moments. I think the number one favorite story moment, I'm just going to get it off the bat right now, right here, is the reveal of the Flame Emperor. That part one, well, towards the end of part one moment was so powerful because you didn't see it coming. Maybe some of you did, especially if you listen to the Japanese dub, where if you listen to Flame Emperor, you can kind of tell it could have been a female voice. In the English dub, they used a different voice actor for it and didn't sound anything like Edelgard. So it kind of threw me off, and I didn't see the puzzles the first time, but looking back, the clues were definitely there, and I was like, oh, why didn't I see that? I felt so dumb, but it worked out perfectly. Loved that reveal. So good and powerful, especially either the Black Eagles moment or the Blue Lions moment. So I played Black Eagles first, and I chose to do the Edelgard route first. That moment where you defect to Edelgard's side and you betray the Church of Seiros, and Rhea just stares down at you, like she kind of like lifts up her head, but her eyes like follow you, and it's scary, man. And then she transforms into the Immaculate One. That whole moment is incredibly impactful. Would it be more impactful if it wasn't just still images? But hey, this is kind of a visual novel here. Can't have cutscenes all the time. Over on the Blue Lion side, we did get a cutscene, and it was the moment that Dimitri snapped and cracked. Now that is a good moment too, because up until that point, there was definitely signs of Dimitri's darkness, and you could see that, and you're like, oh, something's gonna happen. He's gonna snap at any moment. But for the most part, he was kind of the typical Fire Emblem lord who, fought for righteousness, and he was good to his people. But then that moment, he completely changes, and obviously that translates into part 2 as well, where he's just a total different monster, like the monster that was hidden within him this whole time. And that's unique. That's different for a Fire Emblem Lord, and I like that. Kind of flips that whole narrative on its head. So that's why I like the reveal of the Flame Emperor, because it leads to a lot of great character growth and discovery for some of the cast. That's definitely my favorite story moment. Another one of my favorite story moments is anything with Sothis. She was basically the sidekick of the game until she disappears. When she does disappear and you become or kind of fuse with Byleth, it was a little sad. And especially going through part 2, you never see her again. It's like, well, I don't know if I like this. I don't know if I want that. So maybe it sounds like it's not one of my favorite parts, but I do appreciate her there and the commentary that she would give. But that leads to another complaint I have, is that we don't fully understand who Sothis was, other than she was the goddess, supposedly. Not supposedly, she was the goddess. But where did she come from? Where were the powers? Like, what's the deal with these children? I don't know. I don't understand everything. The Monakeets, or whatever they call them in this game, I always forget. I'm sorry. Whatever they call them in this game, they're really confusing to me. Like, are they related by blood? If they're not, where did they come from? Is Sothis the god of them all, or why are they following Sothis in particular? What's the details behind this? So there's a lot of questions to be asked, and not a lot of answers given in that sense. At the same time, thank goodness there are questions to be asked and things that we can theorize about. I think that's a lot better than just more basic than a ham sandwich, I'm trying to think, were there any other favorite story moments? There's definitely side moments and characters that stand out. I really like Edelgard. Hilda has really grown on me. I mentioned those already. Another question I have is about those that slither in the dark. I don't know if they were fully explained either. Same thing with Sothis, which, to be fair, it kind of adds to their mystery. But you usually at least explain what the bad guys are doing, what their whole purpose is. And I don't feel like it was fully explained, in my opinion, but maybe someone would be in the comments. If you would actually pay attention, you would realize that blah, 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 blah. Hey, man, you in the comments, thank you. Thanks for calling me out. But there's also Cinder Shadows. I liked that we saw Byleth's mother and learned a little bit more about her and kind of had a story about that. That was great. But at the same time, we kind of don't know who she was. She was made by Seiros, who is Rhea, and that means she was either born of Seiros or she was created. When I say created, are we talking like scientifically cloned? Or are we talking like divine creation here, like a god is? I don't know. It's not completely clear because she was trying to revive her mother, Sothis, and that's why she put the heart into Citri. But it also seems like she had tried multiple times and there was a few failures. Rhea hid the failures in the abyss, as far as I could understand. There's still some questions to be answered there. Again, goes back to Sothis and her children and whatnot. But hey, I like the story, I like the plots, and I like what I see. But I think all these questions and things that have not been answered lead me to believe there could be a sequel or even a prequel in the future. I guess that kind of takes me to the future of the series. If they were to do a sequel to Three Houses, how would you do it? It's hard because you have to take into consideration everyone played a different route. Everyone did a different story. I mean, yes, you have some people who did all four, but everyone's ending is different. And the developers have come and said, like, there's no one true path. We didn't want to, like, say one path was more important than the others. And that's totally understandable. I get that. There is merit to having the different ways it could play out. But when it comes to the sequel, it's kind of hard to work with that. What they could do is make the sequel take place hundreds of years after the fact of the main game. So you wouldn't be working with Byleth anymore, I don't think, unless he or she has eternal life somehow, or at least a very long life. You could still have the monarchy characters work, and maybe you could have Flayn and Sedith there chilling. You know, maybe Flayn has grown up a little bit. Maybe you couldn't bring back the previous units unless they were like descendants of them, and you would just have to play it as if no matter what events happened in the first game, Fodlan is going to end up in this situation. So almost as if like none of it matters, kind of. So maybe that's not the great thing. But I think if they wanted to answer a lot of those questions, they could do it if it was, hundreds of years in the future. Kind of make a Fodlan that is similar but different to what Fodlan used to be. And that could be really interesting, kind of re-explore the world in that sense. Don't know what we do about Sothis. That's a question in and of itself, but we'll see. Another thing they could do instead of a sequel is do a prequel. I don't know how many years in the past you would want to do it. You could try to bring in like some of the parents of the current cast. It might lead to a few continuity errors, so I think you would have to go a little bit farther back in time. And if you do, it would probably make the story a little easier to tell and answer those burning questions, I feel like. Either way, it would be a little hard to do a prequel or sequel to Fodlan, which is a shame because I love Fodlan and would love to see there be another game set in it, but Fodlan might just be a one-and-done type situation. I mean, it all depends on what Intelligent System has planned. Whether they decide to go with Three Houses sequel or related, or to go in an entirely different direction with the next Fire Emblem game that's not a remake, I think they should keep the monastery type thing, not the monastery itself, but a hub world type area. And here's my vision for it. You are a lord or mercenary of some kind, and you have people who look up to you as their leader. And so you're kind of the teacher in that sense, but you're more of a leader. And you help your units, your battalion train, and you give them guidance in what ways they can be better and what ways they can improve. Instead of being set in a monastery or an academy, you're in a village, and this is your home base. And your home base can move wherever you go. And so maybe the settings can change. Maybe there's new things to unlock. Or maybe at times you'll enter a new town, a new village, and the scenery changes. Granted that it would be more work for the team, but it would be really cool to have moments where you can kind of explore different towns as you go about the world, similar to what Shadows of Valentia did. I don't think it's impossible to have multiple hub worlds depending on the story. And I think that would, again, bring that immersion and connectivity that I adored with Three Houses. Another thing I want is for them to keep the customization, as I mentioned. So I know people are worried that it may become where we get rid of like unit classes entirely. I don't think that's the case. I think you can keep customization like it is, but just improve upon that concept. I guess my last desire for the future of Fire Emblem is to keep the units relevant. I don't want to see bench warmers ever again in Three Houses. I know that's very demanding. I want characters to all have a say in things. I want them to be important to the story. And not everyone has to have the same importance, but I don't want anybody to fall behind and just be kind of like just that one unit that just sucks, or that one unit that I don't like their play style. I want them to have meaning within the narrative and at least like give their thoughts on what's happening. Easier said than done, but I think the Fire Emblem team proved that they can do it. And with that, spoiler talk is done. For those who didn't get to hear the spoiler talk, all I'm going to say is, for the future of Fire Emblem, I hope we see more of the same from Three Houses, but just, improved upon. And whether that be we're still in Fodlan or an entirely new area, fine by me. Whatever they have in mind, I'll be with it. Just make sure you bring your narrative, your lore, and your good gameplay. That's all I can ask for. Oh, and good characters too. I think the Fire Emblem series is as strong as it's ever been, and that we have so much to look forward to in the future, whether that be a remake of a previous made Fire Emblem game, a remaster of, say, the Tellius games, or even a sequel. I think either this year or the next year we'll get something new and something exciting, at least announced. So where does Three Houses fall in line with other Fire Emblem games? Like I said at the very beginning, when I first played it, first beat the route that I played, I said, this is my favorite Fire Emblem game. And then a couple days later, I kind of stood back and said, no, wait, there's some flaws here. It's actually my third favorite Fire Emblem game. And I think I said that in my review. Now, after having everything to release, the DLC is there, I have moved it to as my second Fire Emblem game. It has impressed me so much, and I think about it constantly, and how much I enjoyed it, and how much I just want to play it. To me, this is one of the best Fire Emblem games. If you haven't played it yet, pick it up. This is the perfect time to. First year anniversary, give it a shot. And if you had, you've probably played all 4 routes. Who's stopping you from doing it again? Of course, if you've already done all the routes, then no need, I guess. Happy Fire Emblem Three Houses anniversary, everybody. And hopefully we get some more Fire Emblem news in the near future. Thank you so much for watching. I know this video was rather long and rambly. Forgive me for that. I went off script for most of it. But one last thing I want to say is I might have put too much emphasis on my opinion that the story is incomplete or that there are still questions to be answered. So please forgive me if that's not the case. But I do wish it made it clearer in some cases, and I still think there are some big questions that should be answered. Anyway, video's done, so no more. Please look forward to more videos, including Waifu Battle Royale, and I hope to see you next time. Goodbye, you good people. The Church of Seiros is evil. I cannot stress enough how much I hate this church. Yeah, they do some good, and they have their charity work, and they try to help everybody, but they have utter control over Fodlan. They are corrupt. Lady Rhea has some crazy maniacal issues, and they have too much power in this country. I don't blame people from wanting to separate from them. They are an evil, a plague upon this country.
With me, Lady Rhea? Always.
Oh my gosh. I've seen the light. All hail Lady Rhea. All hail the Church of Seiros. Amen.